Today is week one of a brand new series, Keep the Change. It'll be taken by our very own Mark Pomeroy.
Well, hey there to our Elevate Online family. Great to have you with us this week. And a special shout out to those of you joining us for the first time, wherever it is in the world you're tuning in from. It's great to have you here. And we've been on an incredible journey together, and that journey continues. And we've got so much to celebrate. For example, last week we had our good friend Amit from Compassion Australia, who both preached that week's message, and he also was able to update us on the partnership that we have with Compassion in the Philippines. And the end of that, both in our live experience here in Perth and also in our online experience, we gave the opportunity for people to sponsor a child in the region of the Philippines that we partner with. And we've already got a lot of kids that have been sponsored by our people over recent years. And I am thrilled to announce, and Amit was so pumped, that 16 more kids were sponsored last week, just in that one day alone. And so congratulations, well done to those of you that have stepped up for that on behalf of the kids and the families themselves, who obviously we haven't met in person yet. Just a huge thank you. And you literally have made a dent in eternity. You've literally changed and begun the change in direction and opportunities for those kids. Now, just a little heads up. If you missed last week or you missed the opportunity to sponsor, go back to last week's full experience, and there's a little link right at the top of the show notes there that you can actually copy and paste into your web browser, and it'll take you to where you can sponsor a child as well. So just fantastic, and we're going to continue to partner with Compassion, and there's plenty more great things ahead with that. Now, today we're launching a brand new series called Keep the Change, and it's a series all about money and stuff. And this topic of money and stuff is a topic we cover every single year. I mean, there's a few things we cover every single year, kind of the big rocks, if you like. One is the character of God, who God is, and that was actually our last series, What Are You Expecting? And today we're launching this new series about money and stuff. And the fact is that God has a lot to say about money and stuff. You'll find over 2,500 verses in the Bible about money and stuff. Jesus himself spoke more about money and stuff than any other topic. And in fact, over a half, nearly 2/3 of the stories or the parables that Jesus taught were about money and stuff. And it's kind of obvious why. I mean, if we were to be completely honest with ourselves, and that is because money and stuff is probably the number one, certainly in the top 3 things that just easily move up to try and compete with God as the number one priority, as the thing we give most of our attention to. And God wants to keep coming back to this, keep coming back to recalibrate us, to make sure he's number one, and make sure that we're using money and managing money in a way that brings him glory. And I'm particularly passionate about this subject, and so I'm going to be teaching all of these 3 weeks. And I'm passionate about it because I actually grew up in a house where I got no advice, next to no advice, about how to manage money and how to handle stuff. And it's not that I'm trying to dunk on my parents. In fact, here in Australia, in that generation, that was pretty common. You just weren't allowed to. You just weren't allowed to talk about money. It was the topic was off the table. And so, yeah, I didn't get bad advice. I just got no advice. And that might be you. That might be your story. You might have grown up in a household where you got no advice. Or perhaps worse still, You may have grown up in a household where you got bad advice, or you were given bad modeling as to how to handle money and stuff. And that potentially has caused you or has led you to be in a place in your life where you're not currently managing money and stuff well in a way that brings God glory. And here's the option. Even in this series, there's a fork in the road for you. There's a hinge point for you. You can either continue to blame your parents and blame your upbringing and blame the lack of advice or the bad modeling. Or I would invite you to do what I did, and that's to own your story and to educate yourself. Find out what God says about managing money and stuff, and then begin to put that into practice and watch things happen. Watch things change. Watch things improve. Now, little heads up, this is only a 3-week series, and there is no way that we are going to be able to cover off everything in 3 weeks. So we're just going to hit a few of the high points over these 3 weeks. But here's the benefit of the fact that we teach on this series every year, and the benefit of technology, because we've captured every year that we've taught on money and stuff, we've captured that both on our podcast and also in the last 12 months here in our online experience. So I want to encourage you, especially those of you who need to catch up, who need to educate yourself even more, like I said, encourage you to go back. Now, here's the last 4 years, well, 4 years, but it's one series in each of the 4 years. So starting at the most recent, in 2020, we taught this series, If Money Talked. That's what you're going to be looking for, either in our online experience or on our podcast. The year before, on our podcast, you'll catch and be looking for Like a Boss. The year before that, 2018, you'll be looking for Economy. And the year before that, 2017, on our podcast, you'll need to be looking for Making Change. And I'm pretty confident if you digest all of those teaching series, as well as come on this journey with us for Keep the Change, that your education level is going to increase dramatically. Even if you think you're pretty savvy, I'm confident God's got something more for you. So what I want to do today is I just want to set things up with a flyover of 5 of the big ticket items that God talks about when it comes to money and stuff. Kind of like the top 5, if you like. And again, as I said, it's not going to cover everything. And yes, we're going to teach again next week, and then we're going to teach again the week after. Next week, we're going to talk about lies that our culture tells us about money. And then week 3, we're going to teach about how to be rich towards God. Today is a flyover. The top 5, or my top 5, things that God says about money and stuff. And here's the first one. Develop a written plan. Now, yes, I know you see right through that word written plan. You know what I'm talking about. You know that I'm referring to a budget. And potentially for some of you, the B word, budget, is a dirty word in your vocabulary. But maybe see it this way. A budget is simply a mechanism for telling your money where to go rather than you wondering where it actually went. It's a plan. In fact, Jesus said it this way. Is there anyone here who, planning to build a house, doesn't first sit down and figure out the cost so you know if you can complete it? I mean, if you only get the foundation laid and then run out of money, you're going to look pretty foolish. Develop a plan. And we know that about building, but here's the thing. That's true also of building a life that brings God glory when it comes to managing money and stuff. And so this idea of a budget, it's an intentional act. It's like your game plan. And you know the thing, you get to a big sporting event, like a big final of a season of sport, a Super Bowl, the AFL Grand Final, whatever it is. When they interview the coach of the winning team and they stick that microphone in his face and they say, so tell us, how did you get here and how is it that you won today? The coach doesn't just kind of scratch their head and say, well, I don't know. No, that coach will tell you about their plan, their pre-game preparation, their season preparation, their long-term preparation, and reaching the high point of winning the final, winning the grand final, winning the Super Bowl. That was like the last stop on what was a very intentional plan. And that's got to be true of us when it comes to managing money and stuff. We've got to be intentional. So develop a written plan. Secondly, avoid debt. Yeah, I know. Some of you are like, oops, too late. So, okay, let me say it differently. Avoid debt, or if you are in debt, get out of debt and then avoid debt. Okay, either way, get to a place or stay at a place where you're no longer in debt. And when I talk about debt, I'm particularly talking about consumer debt. Things like credit cards, things like store cards, things like personal loans, things like buy now, pay later platforms, things that essentially boil down to you and or I choosing to spend money we don't yet have, to be spending other people's or other institutions' money. That's debt. And the amount of times that I have heard people say, well, you know, consumer debt, it's just normal. Like everyone has it. And I say to them, actually, no. Not everyone has it. And that's kind of exposes the trap that the financial system that we live in wants us to believe. That buy now, pay later is normal. That credit cards debt is normal. That personal loans are normal. And that's why ads are coming at us all the time. It just normalizes it. Everyone has it. It's just normal. So you should too. And they never talk about the downsides. But here's the difference. Consumer debt is common, but it's not God's best, and that's the issue here. In fact, King Solomon, the wise one, said this: the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower, that's you if you have consumer debt, is a slave to the lender. And I know people who have read this before, or I've preached it before, and they've said, slave? Well, that sounds a bit far-fetched. Well, what I say to them, and I said this in our series If Money Talked last year, if you have consumer debt and you don't think you're a slave to it, because here's the thing, a slave doesn't have options. A slave is bound to do what the master tells them, and they don't have the opportunity of saying no or doing it differently. So if you don't think you're a slave to the institution that you have borrowed money from, then here's what I want you to do. Tomorrow, by the way, this is sarcasm, don't try this at home. Tomorrow, just stop paying the repayments. And eventually they're going to contact you. It's going to be a letter, it's going to be an email, it's going to be a text message, it's going to be a phone call. It's probably all of the above because they're going to come looking for you. When they get to you, just say to them, you know what? I've decided not to pay the repayments anymore. I'm just not feeling it anymore. And then see what happens. You will soon discover that you are very much a slave and they are very much the master. You don't have that option. You will do what they will tell you to do. But a strange thing happens when we get out of debt and when we stay out of debt. That all of a sudden, the money you earn, you get to decide, not a financial institution. You get to decide where to send it and where to spend it. Number 3, cultivate high quality relationships. And this isn't a money principle. This is a life principle. This. In fact, it's not even a Jesus principle. This is a if you want to do life well principle. Cultivate high quality relationships. It's true in parenting. If you want to be a high highly effective parent, then ensure you orbit in close proximity to other highly effective parents. It's true in marriage. If you want to have a highly effective marriage, then ensure that you're regularly in orbit with other people who have a high quality marriage. It's true in health. Because what happens is, with the sphere that you develop, with the close relationships that you develop, their behavior collectively is the normal that you're staring down every day. So it's true on the positive. If you want to positively influence your parenting, your marriage, your health, then be intentional in developing high quality relationships. The converse is also true, that if you want to sabotage your marriage, parenting, health, then hang around people who have sabotaged theirs, because you will now be orbiting in a sphere, in a realm where that behavior is normalized. Everyone's done it. Everyone's doing it. Yeah, everyone's done it. Everyone's doing it. Can be on the positive side or it can be on the negative side. And you've got to be intentional. We've got to be intentional about that. Also, in the area of our finances. It's no surprise that Paul wrote this to the church. Don't be deceived. Evil companies, evil, low quality, ineffective company corrupts good habits. So if all of your friends, or the majority of your friends, spend more than they earn, borrow beyond their capacity, aren't ever generous financially, there is a much higher likelihood that you're going to go down that route as well, because all of a sudden, over time, that behavior seems normal. So we've got to break out of the bubble and cultivate high quality relationships with people who manage money well. And when you do, and as you do, learn to ask questions. Tell me how you've developed the skills you've developed. Tell me some of the failures you've had and what you learned from them and how you turned things around. Tell me how you've built on certain things. Tell me what it looks like to be a financially generous person. Tell me what it looks like to not be in debt. And they will. They will, because if you have a relationship with them, then my hope is that they're going to want you to experience the same freedom that they experience. Okay, number 4, save and invest. And those two things aren't the same, although they will both require you to not spend everything you earn. Again, this King Solomon, the wise one, said this: the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. So let me again repeat something that I said in our If Money Talks series last year. I made the point that if you go to work and you get your pay and you spend every single cent that you've earned, you're not actually working for yourself. In fact, all you are is a money laundering service for everyone that eventually gets that money. Your internet service provider, your mobile phone provider, your streaming TV service, your grocery store, your electricity company. If 100% of the money that is paid to you ultimately goes to them, you're just a money laundering service. You are not actually working for you. You only start working for you when you learn to save and invest. In fact, we say it this way. This is kind of our best distillation of the pattern for money management. And it's simply give, save, live. In that order of priority too, by the way. And we're going to talk about giving in week 3. Give, save, live. This idea of ensuring we intentionally save, intentionally invest, and then learn to live off the rest. And then the final one I want to highlight in today's flyover is be incredibly generous. And you'll start to see how these all tie in together. I mean, the idea of avoiding debt is going to help you to be intentionally generous. It's going to give you the freedom that you get to decide where to send your money when it comes to being generous. It's hard to be generous when you're broke. It's hard to be generous when you're in debt. I'm talking financially generous. I mean, you can open the door for somebody. You can say a nice thing to them. But specifically, being financially generous, this all ties together. And a goal along the journey of becoming financially generous is becoming somebody who is both willing and able to be financially generous. Willing and able. And those two things matter. Because some of you understand you've been willing. You've seen a child that needs sponsorship. You've seen an opportunity to give to some very worthy cause. You want to be somebody that's generous with your friends, generous with your family. You're willing, and then you've felt the frustration of not being able, of not having the financial resources to match your willingness. So you're willing, but not able. And then you probably know people, and don't judge them, but let's face it, chances are you know some people who are very well-resourced financially. They're very able to be generous, and yet they haven't discovered that the point in life is not just to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate for yourself. And they are able but not willing. The magic happens, the power lies in people who develop the internal willingness and the financial ability, and they marry them up, and all of a sudden things change big time. That's what financial freedom starts to really look like and really feel like. So hey, there's a flyover. As I said, it's just brief today. It sets this series up, and look, go back and watch and listen to those last 4 series we did and educate yourself, because we want to, and more importantly, God wants to see you live financially free, be effective in managing money and stuff, and bringing Him glory. Friends, I'm looking forward to being with you again next week.